So I'm just going to call this C program.c. So this is going to be compiled. C is a compiled language, so we don't have to do our hash bang up here. We're going to compile it with a compiler. So what I want to do is actually do the equivalent of my import statement in Python. I want to do hash include and stdio, so standard IO, so standard input output .h. This is just a header file, so this is like our library that we brought in with our Python. We have standard input output. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We're just going to do possibly the most basic C program ever. We're going to basically do hello world with a twist. So in C, we have to do things as functions. With our scripting languages, we just, wrote things one after another and everything was dandy. It's going to be a little bit different here. We do need to do functions, and there is a function called main in every C program that is the main function, as the name implies, and it is going to be run when the program starts. So we do int main. So that's going to return an integer. There's other types of functions, certainly, like void returns nothing, string returns a string, things like that. So int main, and to take user input, do int arg c. So that's the argument count, and this is just standard C stuff. You can look it up if you don't remember it. So argument count, and then you basically pass it a character array of the command line arguments. So again, that's just standard. So we are going to take command line arguments for this, as opposed to asking the user, which you could do that as well. So in our bash script, we took a command line argument. In our Python script, we took input from the user by prompting them during the program. With this one, we are going to take command line arguments, but you could just as easily prompt the user. Alright, so in C, to denote our functions and loops and things, we use brackets, or, well, curly braces, I guess is what they're technically called. So we're opening up this int main, and we can also go ahead and close it and work between these. It's good practice to do indentation, but C doesn't take the indentation as fact. As long as you have your braces, you're good. This is just, good programming style. Let's do an if statement again. So once again, have to be different among our programming languages. So the correct syntax here is open parentheses, and then what we want to test. So I want to test whether the length, so the argument count, is less than 2. So with C, our first argument is going to be the program name itself, and then the second argument will be our first user command line argument. So if the argument count is less than 2, in other words, if the user does not supply a command line argument, again, we can put some help information in there. Again, we need our curly braces around our code that's going to be run as part of the if statement. And again, the indentation is not actually going to be interpreted by the program. It's just good practice, makes it easier to read. Use a function called printf. Printf may be subject to some security issues. You might want to look up that if you're interested about format string issues. So we're going to do something that looks a little funny here. So in parentheses we have %s and then \n. \n actually means new line, and our %s is actually a placeholder for a string. We want a comma, and then we want the string, so pass your name as an argument. So this is going to print out the string to the console if, and only if, the argument count is less than 2, so the user doesn't provide a command line argument. Just like our help information that we used in our bash script, if they didn't use the program correctly, we showed them how. So this time we once again again give help information. Pass your name as an argument. But if they do give us a command line argument, we don't run that if statement. So we instead do an else. And else, we don't have to do an argument here, so we don't need that. But we do need our parentheses. Actually, if it's one line only, you can do it without the parentheses, but I can't keep the little tricks straight for all of the different languages, so I just basically stick to the basics of syntax. There's always little tricks you can do with all the languages, but there's so many. So this time, again, I want to do that printf. Again, there might be some things you can do with printf from a security perspective. Again, I want to give it a string and then a new line. So I want to say hello, string, new line. And the string I want to give it is argv. Remember, argv is our character array of our arguments. So I'm going to tell it I want 1. So remember 0 in our array. So the first command line argument will be the program name itself. So argv1 is going to be our first command line argument. So make sure we've got all of our parentheses. So curly braces, parentheses, you know what I mean. Every time we open one, we need to have them closed. That makes the indentation work really well because we can kind of see if we end up back here at the base at the end, then we're good. So since this is an integer, so it's going to return an integer, we actually need to have it return something. So let's do if argv less than 2. So this is an error, so let's have it return -1, so it failed. But if it works, let's return 0. So it passed. That isn't completely necessary. I mean, the main thing with the functions is that we call a function and it returns something that we're able to pass back to other functions. So we don't have to do everything all in one little script. We can have different functions that we can pass different inputs. We don't have to keep writing the same code over and over. So a little bit more of a complex construct of how to do programming, but it's definitely a best practice and not one I always follow, so take my lead. Alright, so we can't just run cprogram.c, even if we do a chmod on it, because C is, again, compiled, so we are going to have to use a C compiler for this. So luckily there is a C compiler included in most Linux distributions. GCC, the GNU C compiler. So we want cprogram.c, and we can do -o for output, so we can name it something in particular, so we can call it cprogram. If we don't do that, then it'll just call it a.out, which it'll still run, so a.out is fine, but we can name it something with -o. I got an error. What did I do wrong? Expected semicolon before return. What have I forgotten? Another thing that's complicated about C is that it has semicolons in it, which I started out in C, so I was good at my semicolons, but now I've used Python and Ruby so much that sometimes I forget my semicolons. Sure enough, we need a semicolon right here. Forgot one. Let's try it again. No error that time. Looks good to me. Alright, chmod plus x, cprogram, run cprogram, pass your name as an argument, Georgia. Hello, Georgia. So, probably the second simplest program, because typically you do hello world and then something like this where you give it your name. But we did something a little bit simpler with C, which I realize may give you the impression that C is not as powerful as some of the other languages. That's not true at all. I just think it's a little bit more complicated with all the braces and the semicolons and the functions and things like that. We will return to C briefly in the exploit development, but I mean, keep in mind that the entire Linux operating system is written in C, so it's certainly powerful. It does all that. So it's not any less powerful. I just think it's a little more complicated, but it's certainly worth knowing because, again, so much stuff is written in C. You'll probably, if you continue, find yourself working with some C code, trying to find bugs in it, things like that. So it's certainly worth knowing the basics of as many programming languages as you can, but I would say getting really familiar with at least one language and having kind of a working knowledge where you can, with the help of Google, pull in all the right syntax of other languages is definitely helpful. I mean, the more, the better. So, again, just kind of a short overview here. Certainly can't make you a programming expert in, 48 minutes, but hopefully it can lead you on that path, and if you like it, I certainly encourage you to continue. Alright, so let's actually start pen testing now. So now we're going to take a look at a tool called Metasploit, which is a pretty awesome pen testing tool, and then we'll start actually attacking our systems. So you're about to get your first shell on a target.